Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Abby. I am a homeschooling mom of 5, and today is one of my favorite videos to share each month. It is my monthly open collaboration called Homeschool Show Tell, and this is something that my friend Jessica from the Waldock Way and I open up every month on YouTube for other YouTube creators to participate in. So there is a playlist info in the description box down below if you would like to share on this month's topic. So for the month of October, we are all sharing about how we make history fun in our homeschool. So today I'm going to share how we do history in our homeschool, how I weave it in throughout everything we do to keep it interesting and to keep my kids focused. And then if you want to see how other people do that as well, you can follow the playlist in the description box down below. So let's get started. Okay, so if you've been around my channel for a while, then you know that I love history, but it's not always been that way. History was my least favorite subject in school, as it is for most of us. I want to say it's what I hear most often with homeschooling families is like, I didn't like history, we don't like history, I never liked history, and I still don't, kind of a thing. And I did not like it growing up until my senior year in high school when I had a really incredible history teacher. And from that point on, I enjoyed history. So in college, I loved history. As a parent, I love history. It's something that I love to pursue in my own time. I love to read all sorts of historical nonfiction and historical fiction. And most often when it's my turn to choose a movie, I choose a movie based on some area of history that I'm interested in. And thankfully, I married somebody who loves history as well. And so it is a topic of conversation around here all the time, homeschooling or not. However, I wanted to make history palatable for my kids as well, because that's what made all the difference for me. So first things first, I would say that the very first thing we do to enjoy history in our home is we use our curriculum, and that curriculum was chosen based on what I thought was the most interesting curriculum out there at the time. So for me, in my house, we use Story of the World. And I know not everybody loves Story of the World, and that some people are like, it's so dry, and then some people are like, it's so rich. And I think that the reason we love it so much is because we make it work for us. So we don't just open and go with Story of the World. We pause and we pursue topics for weeks on end sometimes, and we do it with friends. So we have, for the last 7 years, I want to say, done Story of the World with friends, and we meet twice a month, once a month at my house, once a month at my girlfriend's house, and we do a project in the book based on what we've read. So usually we read a chapter a week, so every 2 weeks we meet and we do a project from the activity guide. So the last time we met at my house, where we've cycled through all of the books, and we're back to the first book again. And so we were talking about ancient China. We did paper making here at my house and some calligraphy. And it was really interesting. The kids love it. We have all ages here. So we have everywhere from a junior in high school all the way down to a couple of 1-year-olds. So the kids who are participating in the projects are 4 years old through 16, and we tailor it to fit each of them. And sometimes the projects are for younger kids, so we just have the older ones help, but everyone enjoys it, or they remember doing it when they were younger. And that's just one reason that we really love Story of the World. Usually when we get to a chapter that moves through quickly, because they just do like a chapter or 2 per main history theme. So say the American Revolution, we paused there and then we continued to study it on our own for about a month before we picked our curriculum up again. And we do that often. Any major world wars, anything like that, main areas in history that we want to go a little bit more in depth. We did the civil rights movement for 6 weeks, I want to say, before we picked the curriculum back up and moved on. So every couple weeks we were meeting at each other's house to go a little further, assigning reading based on the book. And so that's the first way that we incorporate history in an enjoyable way in our homeschool, which is choosing a curriculum that we enjoy and then making it work best for us. So going beyond the textbook is what I'll say. Next to that, I will add an additional curriculum that we utilize for my younger kids, which is 5 in a row. So quite often, as we're choosing our 5 in a row book, I'll choose one based on an area we are in history, mostly when we're in more of like the modern times, although there are a couple of books that you can use for medieval times and you know, a lot of American history, but we choose books based on where we are in history or places in history, periods in history that my younger kids might not have read about yet. So whenever we are doing a 5 in a row book that has the opportunity for a heavy history influence, we will do that, and then I will go and work with my younger kids on that, and sometimes we'll also extend that unit out a little bit as well, because I love history, because I think history can be so interesting and so helpful to have a good foundation in. We will often go beyond just one day in our 5 in a row curriculum if it's a good area of discussion. So kind of sticking with that curriculum choices area, another way that we weave history in that is enjoyable is through Teachers Pay Teachers studies. So there are so many free resources on Teachers Pay Teachers, but one of my kids' favorite activities from Teachers Pay Teachers is an escape room, and you can find those from like $2 through like $10. And when we're studying something in history that I either don't like the project in the book, or they're just still interested in it, or I just want them to have a little bit more review, I will search that topic and then escape room. And there are so many really cool escape room or just, you know, various resources on Teachers Pay Teachers that are so interesting for the kids. So I didn't love the topic or the activity, or maybe there wasn't an activity for the Dust Bowl. And so I searched Dust Bowl escape room, and lo and behold, there were a handful of them. So I found the one that I thought would be closest to what we had studied, printed that out, and my kids spent a good hour wandering through the living room and homeschool room and kitchen working on this Dust Bowl escape room. And we probably do an escape room at least twice a semester, just based on a different history topic, and the kids really enjoy it. It's a great way to continue to review some of the main themes and topics and dates and things like that without it being just a boring piece of paper. And then one additional way that we go more in depth with the curriculum that we choose with history is by assigning them history projects at the end of each year. So I have a couple of videos I want to mention here. One, I have a flip through of Story of the World that I did a couple of years ago. So if you want to see that, I'll link that up there. But the other video that I have to mention here is I did a whole video on how we do end of the year history projects. But a brief overview is I will have each of my kids, and my girlfriend who we do history with does the same thing. We have our kids each pick a person or a time period that we studied in history that year, and then we give them about 6 weeks to really study more about that person, about that time in history, and create a project. And then at the end of the school year, we do a living history museum. So I have 5 kids, she has 6. I have 4 and she has 5 who are actively participating in school right now. A couple of them are toddlers. And so we have 9 kids who are giving history presentations each year. And it's really fun. They'll each make a dish, they'll do a display board, they'll dress up if it's appropriate, and they will give a presentation, and then we'll share a meal together about that time in history. So the kids have chosen, you know, from different world wars, they've chosen to be soldiers. We've had a medieval monk, we've had presidents, we've had heroes, we've had like generic, you know, themes. So what's one? Like a scientist from the space race. So we've had all sorts of different ways that the kids have chosen to go with those projects. We like to give them the opportunity to make it their own, but it's just a really neat way to connect with something that they read and to go a little bit further. And so bringing in food, costumes, assigned reading that they do, and research for those few weeks really gets them excited about it, and then they're very excited to share. So I have a video about how we do that as well. Moving on from the more curriculum focused areas of history and into just various ways that we weave history in throughout our school weeks and our school days. One of the ways that we do that is by reading the history of the majority of what we're studying. So each semester we are studying a different poet, artist, composer. Through Redefining School, the kids are learning about different authors and literary greats, and so they're also learning the history of the hymns, the compositions, the artist, and the time that this artist lived. And so in a lot of our curriculum, because we use a lot of Simply Charlotte Mason curriculum, it's already written in there, and like Mindy from Redefining School already shares background on some of these authors. But if it's not something that comes in our curriculum, like our hymns and things like that, we'll continue to learn on our own, find the story of the hymn, find the time period in history that something was written or painted, and just make some connections based on that. So recently I was choosing some hymns and some artwork to put together a little Christmas unit for my kids, and I realized that the hymns, the poems, and the artwork that I pulled together were all written during the Civil War. And so you bet that I added a little bit of information for the kids on that so that we can study the Christmas time during the Civil War in our homeschool. So just an interesting way to go a little bit more in depth with other things that you're studying in your homeschool is to add that historical background to what you're already studying. Just mention it a couple minutes as you're introducing a new topic or a new poem, and it can be another way to just help cement some things or revisit some things that you've already studied. From there, I'll mention as well that keeping a book of centuries is another helpful way to incorporate history in all that you do and to make other connections. So keeping a book of centuries per family or per child, we choose to do one per family, I just can't keep up with one per child, is a great way to write down dates, main events, people's birth dates or death dates, and then make connections about things that overlap. Like, oh, I didn't know that he was alive during his time, or that this happened while this person was alive. And it just helps them make connections across the board, because I think we all study history as if each thing is mutually exclusive, when in reality, most of history is all happening at the same time. Next, another one of my favorite ways to incorporate history in everything we do is to make it where I choose our assigned reading and our family read alouds. The shelves in our schoolroom are mostly historical fiction and nonfiction. I just love keeping those on hand. I love having a book pairing when we come across something. And so my kids read those books on their own quite often. They're the books that we read aloud, and I love pulling together mini units just by having those books available. So there are book lists everywhere. Most curriculum has additional reading suggestions added to it. We are always choosing those additional reading books. And so in Story of the World, or there are some Ambleside book lists online that I use for my older kids. In our geography, right now we're studying Australia. One of the suggested reading for older kids was 𝐒𝐤𝐥𝐸, so they're reading that right now, which that's geography, but it's also history. Stories of Color is a great online resource. Like I said, Ambleside as well. There are so many different historical book lists you can find. I know that Amber O'Neill Johnston has a great book list that you can, a database you can search on her website as well. So there are so many great places you can visit to find good book pairings, or you can just type in books about XYZ and find good resources. And I love pairing books. I think it's just something that when you're reading, you're thinking about something longer, you're meeting characters, making connections. The Magic Treehouse books are great. The Who Was books, Jessica Waldock from the Waldock Way has a bunch of unit studies based on the Who Was books. Those are great for younger kids. So I could go on and on and on, because historical fiction is my jam, but that's one of the ways that we incorporate history throughout school. And sometimes where I'm assigning things that were not in that time period in history. So for example, Isabella just read Johnny Tremaine. That's not written during ancient times, but she remembers some of that period in history anyway. And so she's able to have a little bit of fluidity there as she's reading, with making connections at least. And then another important way that we incorporate history in our homeschool is Bible history, church history, and missionary history. I can speak for myself and say that growing up in church and in the public school system, church history, Bible history, was completely separate from history that I was learning in school in my textbooks. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I really started to make connections like, oh, this Persian Empire, or this Roman Empire, same Roman Empire, same Persian Empire, this Hammurabi's law, 10 Commandments, like kind of making these cross references. That didn't happen until I was an adult. So I love giving my kids the opportunity to study these things naturally alongside history. So bringing in Bible history, or as you're reading, say, Old Testament history or New Testament, you know, passages, pulling in other things that you know and that you've studied in your history as well, and then incorporating missionaries and missionary stories. I love the YWAM books. Those are a great way to incorporate missionary stories into your book of centuries and into your history as well. Okay, so another time that I like to weave in some history into our homeschool is during our morning meeting time or morning basket, or, you know, whatever you call it in your home. There are some resources that I really enjoy using during that time that we read and watch every day as part of our calendar time. So no matter, like, based on the date that it is that day, so say it's, you know, October 1st, we'll read October 1st in the morning exercises for all the year. There are a lot of historical dates in here. And then we'll also read October 1st in the American Patriots Almanac, which gives you American history in here. And then we will also watch that day's episode of World Watch. So this is not just American history. This is a collection of things: poetry, dates, some character study, and you know, music, but it's also got birth dates, death dates of historical figures. And then this is American history. It's got something that happened in American history that day. And then at the bottom of the page, there's also a thing called American History Parade, and it just runs through the majority of the important things that in history that happened on that day. So one longer passage, and then it has a bunch of quick little bits of info. And then World Watch is a daily current events newscast by World News Group, and it's about 10 minutes long for kids to watch. And it's got a lot of current events, but every now and then they'll also weave in some American history if it's relevant to the day. But I would consider current events also to be a part of a good history study, more like a social studies kind of thing. And so that always produces great conversation and connection as well. So just these various daily resources that talk about that specific date. And then we will pull out our book of centuries and see what else has happened on that day. And then the very last way that I like to incorporate history in our homeschool is through letter subscriptions. So we have the Heritage letters, and then we also get the American Heritage Adventure letters. And these are letters that my kids get each month, and it talks about somebody in American history. I'll put the link down below if you guys want to check it out. And then, so this is Heritage letter. It's like a letter written to you from that person in history, and then it comes with a little bit like a card and a fact card, and then like a little artifact about that person. And then the American Heritage Adventure letter is about historical sites in America or natural parks or just some of the great places in America. So there's a lot of history that come in those letters as well. And then finally, this is not a part of our daily homeschool life, but family trips and visits are so great whether you like history or not. I love history, so I'm always noticing when we'll be in areas as we travel that would be a great connection or a place to visit. But sometimes as we're driving through and just searching something, we found some gems that way as well. And it's so neat just to visit historical sites and get firsthand interaction with some of these places. So once, for example, we were driving up to North Carolina, and I did a little research and found out about a tour at Magnolia Plantation called From Slavery to Freedom that Joseph McGill leads. And that was a pit stop, but it turned into one of the most deeply impactful field trips that the kids and I have ever taken, and it also launched a whole unit study for that next semester in school. It was really amazing. Look it up if you're ever in the area. He also told us about another place in Savannah, which we're in Savannah frequently, but we had never heard of the Owens Thomas House. So we stopped by there on our way home on another trip. When we happened to be in Alabama for a family reunion, a little bit of quick research, and instead of visiting Talladega with our family, we went a different route and visited the Civil Rights Institute. Another incredible experience. We just took a trip out west, and at most of the national parks there is a little history museum, a history of the park, that's always worth it. Tons of places, you know, as we drive, we pass places. We got to visit the Surrender Field and the York House, I believe it's called. Just getting to be in those places and make a connection, whether we studied it that particular year or not, is so great. Whether it's fresh on your mind, or it's just something that you've read in past history, or it's a place you haven't read about yet and you want to. Visiting before you even read about it if you happen to be passing by. And then just as a homeschooling family, the majority of our family trips are based around places we've read about and places we want to visit because of history. So that's another way that we incorporate history just kind of into our family culture and broaden our educational experiences. So that's enough for me. If you want to hear about how other people learn about history in their homeschool, check out the playlist in the description box down below. Or if you have something to add to this conversation, make a video and add it to the playlist in the description box, or I've got a pinned comment in my comments where I can add it for you. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon.